Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. I think, Stephanie, you might be the only one I don't see on video yet. Oh, I see your video as well. Okay, awesome. Everyone is on. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly. Excellent. All right, so all of us are here today for part 3 of a digital workshop on getting the pitch right. This one focuses on a relatable story, and it's in partnership with SecondMuse. So first of all, I am Sweta Gavani. I am the Managing Director for Global Innovation Exchange. Before we get started, just a couple of really quick housekeeping items. Like I said, this workshop is being recorded, so we will share the recording. A lot of our participants have issues with connectivity, so don't worry, we will share it. Second, everybody has been muted, and please stay muted. Just in case you figure out the magical power of unmuting yourself, please do mute yourself again, except the panelists, of course. Third, if you have any technical issues, feel free to chat me at swata/technical issues, technical issues. I'll do my best to address them. And then finally, we're hoping to have at least a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions that you'd like to have addressed at the end from any of our panelists, feel free to share them with Matt, who will introduce himself. And he has his name on this program is Matt-Questions for Speakers. Really quickly, for those of you who aren't aware, with Global Innovation Exchange, our mission is to help social entrepreneurs fundraise more effectively, specifically those who are implementing their wonderful innovations in developing countries. If you'd like to learn more, just go to globalinnovationexchange.org. And as I mentioned, this is part of a multi-part campaign. So this is the digital workshop piece. There is one more piece, but before I mention that, just want to say a huge thank you to all of our wonderful partners who have contributed in a variety of different ways to the content, the prizes, and different pieces that led to this, including SecondMuse, who contributed the content for our workshop today. If you'd like to learn more, you can go to digitalpitch.globalinnovationexchange.org. And then finally, for those of you who aren't aware, one of the most important pieces of this campaign is our digital pitch contest, which is coming to an end in June, so June 30th. So get your pitches in, and we have some wonderful prizes. Again, thankful to our wonderful sponsors for that. So again, just visit us online and feel free to email us if you have any questions. And without any further ado, I'd love to hand it over to our facilitator, our moderator for today, Matt Scott.
Thank you, Sveta. And I'm Matt Scott, Manager of Storytelling and Engagement at SecondMuse. And for those who aren't aware of SecondMuse is an organization that was founded about a decade ago, and we focus on building the communities and businesses that are focused on building the future. And so one of the programs that we have been part of building alongside the Australian Aid Program and the Innovation Exchange, which Stephanie Kimber, one of the panelists, is from, is the Blue Economy Challenge. And that was a call for submissions of aquaculture solutions, basically, that are focused on one way or the other making an impact in the Indian Ocean region. And so we had 200 plus submissions, and from that we chose 10 to be part of the Aquacelerator, which the name comes from Aquaculture Accelerator, as you might imagine, and that is how we know Samil from Enter Gaia. And so as we get started out, this is all about your pitch, and I think it would be great if we could have Samil begin by kicking us off with his own pitch.
Matt, thanks a lot. So I guess Sweat, are you in control of the slides?
You should be able to just share the screen, but if you can't, I'm happy to continue. I have your slides up.
Oh no, I'm happy to do that. Sorry, I thought you were putting them all into the deck.
Yeah, I have them. Let me know if you run into issues.
All right.
There.
Just let me know if everybody can see my full screen.
Yes.
All right, great. So as Matt mentioned, my name is Samil, and I'm the Managing Director of InnerGaia. So how do we feed the world in 2050? That's something that we've been thinking about a lot in InnerGaia. Our answer is to grow a microalgae called spirulina, which is high in protein, vitamins, antioxidants, and minerals. And we currently grow it both in urban environments, like on rooftops in Bangkok and Singapore, and in rural communities, in villages in Madurai and Bangladesh. Now, it's traditionally produced in open ponds or taken from natural lakes. And the challenge with that kind of production technique is that it's prone to airborne contamination risk. Our innovation is that we developed a low-cost, closed system to grow this highly nutritious microalgae, and we can use that system anywhere. And so it solves this airborne contamination risk, and it also allows us to bring some automation and other features to the system design. And we've been a commercial producer using our technology for more than 5 years in Thailand, and now again, as I mentioned, in India and Bangladesh. And because of our track record and how we do it and the quality of the spirulina we produce, we've been fortunate enough to receive a lot of press coverage from many kind of global TV channels. And we also entered a few competitions, and we were fortunate enough to be one of the 10 winners of the Blue Economy Challenge in 2016. And then we were one of the Tech for Farmers Challenge winners in 2017, sponsored by USAID, and a couple of other things as well. Now, what do we do with the spirulina that we produce? We currently don't make tablets or capsules, because those are usually made from spirulina that doesn't have a great taste, and you don't really care about the taste of a tablet or capsule. Our spirulina, because of this close design that we use, is a very, very good or neutral taste. And so we're able to make functional food products from the spirulina, which is important, as I'll mention in a bit. So we make pastas, chocolates, snacks, etc. with the spirulina. And we also strive to uplift livelihoods in the process. We're a social enterprise, and so part of our model is to bring our technology to rural communities, to train the people how to grow spirulina using our technology. And through that training, we qualify them for a financing program that we provide either ourselves or with a partner. And then they grow the spirulina, they keep 20% to improve the nutritional, improve nutrition in their own households through consumption of the spirulina. And they can sell the rest to us, which is a win-win relationship because it adds an income stream to their household while also creating a production base for ourselves. Now we have a diverse team of people who work to support what we do. Scientists, designers, engineers, salespeople, spread out in 3 countries around the world, 4 countries now, sorry. And spirulina is a 3.5 billion-year-old organism. We like to call it the first food. It was consumed by ancient civilizations, but it's currently still produced the way that they produced it thousands of years ago, until now. With our design, we want to see spirulina move from a niche commodity in the supplement space of a few thousand tons per year to a bulk food commodity used to fortify foods around the world and sold on a scale of 20 million tons per year by 2050 to help deal with the food crisis that we mentioned earlier. And so there's a significant market opportunity in the food space, and also spirulina is one of the only natural known sources of blue color, so there's a huge opportunity in the food colorant space as well. And so to do this, what we're looking for is connections to commodity buyers and manufacturers who might be interested in spiraling biomass to work with, as well as socially minded investors who share our vision of the future and want to help us get there. So thank you very much. So that's my presentation and a bit about InnerGaia. And I wanted to use it as an example to show what a presentation for a company can look like, especially an investor teaser deck or something. We used this at presentation at the Fish 2.0 competition finals in Stanford last year, and we won the Southeast Asia track. But the audience panel was a room full of investors, and through that, we've actually found the investor who's completing our Series A round. And I think there's a few important points in here that I'd like to touch on for this part of the discussion, which is how do you get your pitch right? And what are the things to think about as you prepare a pitch? And if you want, I can go straight into that, Sweat and Matt, or would you like to take a break or something? No?
I think
okay.
we could actually come back to that after introducing some of the panelists. I think that's really interesting, and you brought up a great point in terms of there are different audiences and different types of investors that you want to appeal to. So I think that's the perfect segue to a couple of our live panelists, and then also our panelist who is joining by recording. So as you might have seen if you saw the promotional materials for this digital workshop, we have 3 panelists. One joining us by recording is Donna Quan of the UN Environment Program. And we also have David Ball, my colleague here at SecondMuse, who is involved with the Blue Economy Challenge, and Stephanie Kimber of the Australian Aid Program. And so I would love if, just to start out with question 1, if Stephanie, you could introduce yourself and the work you do and tell us more about what you look for in the innovations that you support and fund.
Great, thanks Matt, and thanks fellow panelists and everyone. It's great to be here today. Thanks for joining us. So as Matt said, my name's Stephanie and I work in the Australian Aid Program's Innovation Unit, Innovation Exchange. I'm currently responsible for supporting social entrepreneurship and impact investing in what we call the Indo-Pacific region, so the Indian Ocean, Asia and the Pacific Islands. So to get to your question about what we're looking for, because we are part of an aid program, international development, we are always looking for innovations that contribute to our high-level goals, which are promoting prosperity and poverty reduction in our region with our partner countries. We do this at a high level through supporting private sector development and also through human development. And what I mean, human development usually involves education, health programs, anything related to making sure people are thriving and healthy. And the private sector development, which is what I work on predominantly, is both strengthening domestic private sector in countries, but also making sure that all of the supporting factors are there, that if you want to start a business and you have a great idea in your own country, you can access capital and you can access support, like business support, to help you grow that business. So in the Innovation Exchange, specifically related to the Blue Economy Challenge, what we were looking for were innovations in aquaculture. We saw aquaculture as the future of fish production, but not only fish production, of alternative protein sources. So at a high level, we were looking for development impact. So was there some benefit to people living in developing countries? Was there some poverty reduction element to the innovation? Did it have the potential to scale, to go beyond just a very small project? And when we talk about scale, it's all relative. Could be, 1 or 2 regions, could be a whole country, could be millions. So, it's a subjective term, scale. We were looking for sustainable businesses or businesses that had the potential to become sustainable if they received the right support. We were also looking for innovations and businesses that were focused on promoting gender equality and the empowerment of women. And we were looking for something that was really like, is this different to what is commonly on the market? Is it new for a region, new for a country? We've seen a lot of innovations that perhaps have gained traction in Africa, and we wanted to see if we could bring those to the Pacific Islands or to Asia, or in this challenge to countries in the Indian Ocean. And we were looking for a mix of ideas. Like, we didn't just want ideas from Australia, from America, from Canada, that were then going to go and find somewhere to work. We were looking for ideas that were homegrown by local communities, by people that were deeply connected to the context. And we had a mix of local and international. And if they were international, we wanted to see that they had good connections to partners in those local countries, and that it would be applicable to those countries and to that context. I think I might stop there, Matt.
Thank you, and I think that's a great description. And by the way, because it's June 8th already for you, Happy World Oceans Day. I forgot to mention that at the beginning, but I think that's a good segue into talking with David Ball. And David, could you introduce yourself, and from the SecondMuse perspective, what you're really looking for in the innovations that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. How appropriate that we're having this call on, at the very least, Australian World Oceans Day. Last year, we were all together in New York City presenting our film Making Waves, which featured some of the innovators from the Blue Economy Challenge in Tanzania. So very, very happy to be here. And thanks so much to fellow panelists, Sweta for organizing, Matt for facilitating, and everybody for joining in. It's an honor to share this experience that I had with Samil, who was the first innovator that I got to personally work with at SecondMuse, as well as along with Matt and Stephanie, who were on the team for the Blue Economy Challenge, which was my first project at SecondMuse. I manage acceleration for the company. And so we have very similar goals as Stephanie mentioned. And so I'll talk a little bit at a higher level. I think she did a great job at looking at some of the specific goals that we look for in innovators, especially in the context of the Blue Economy Challenge. I think the similarities run intentionally because we co-developed those goals and looked and sourced and evaluated and kind of selected together. But for us at SecondMuse, I think what we're really looking for are innovators who can push the envelope a little bit. And so what I mean by that, and when I say that, is innovators who not necessarily by themselves are going to create systems change, but can kind of help facilitate and push different stakeholders across different sectors to really create the systems change that we're striving for at SecondMuse. Our goal and our belief is that to really have transformational change in industries like in sectors like aquaculture, food, education, and health, you need to bring together partners from governments, from the private sector, from academia, and use innovators as a way to kind of draw those partners together to get them in a room and to get them to start collaborating. So Samil is a perfect example of how that can happen. Samil, over the course of the 6 months that we worked together, and then if you kind of expand it to the 18 months since we first looked at working with Enter Gaia, you've worked with governments, you've worked with private sector investors, you've worked with companies that are integrating your products into their own soups or into their own pastas or into their own chocolates. So you're a great example of the types of diverse stakeholders that can come together around a specific innovator to kind of shift the way we look at alternative proteins, or look at the ways that we can create different business models to influence the livelihoods of people in Madurai, for example, and in some of the other countries that you're expanding to. When we look for innovations, we look for best in class. I think that's natural. I think there's constraints that we're able to be a little bit more, we're able to take on a little bit more risk. So we're able to look in geographies that may have non-traditional types of innovation. So going beyond the Silicon Valleys and the San Franciscos or the US or the Europes, and to look for innovations that are coming from all around the world, because we're not investing equity into these innovators, we can be a little bit more risky, and we can take a chance on some non-traditional social entrepreneurs. We're looking for, as Stephanie said, innovations that are scalable. So we want to see innovations that can be taken from rooftops in Thailand and to be taken to Bangladesh and into India and to other parts of Thailand. We're at the very core of what we do. We're always looking for impact. I think Enter Gaia hits a trifecta of the impact that we're looking for when we think about the social, environmental, and economic impact. By focusing on women farmers, Enter Gaia and Samil have really been able to kind of create some gender empowerment by focusing on a solution that decreases the environmental impact of producing spirulina. He's had a huge environmental impact as well. And then, of course, the economic benefits of creating this alternative livelihood. So it's, again, really, really easy for me to kind of speak to the success that Samil's had and to look at that as a great example of many of the things we look for at SecondMuse when we source innovation.
Amazing. And I think one key piece of that I just want to echo is the diversity piece. And that's why one of the reasons I was so excited for this digital workshop, because we have you on, we have Stephanie on, and we have the recording from Donna Quan, just speaking to the diversity. We have so many time zones represented that unfortunately Donna Quan couldn't join live, but I would like to share her introduction with you now. Right.
I'm Donna Quan. I look after a global conservation agreement for dugongs and their seagrass habitats, and we are always looking out for partners that can help achieve our conservation mandate. So we don't normally fund projects, but we look for funding, and is those partners who share our environmental, social and development ethics, and as our mandate is to help countries who have dugong populations protect these animals and seagrasses because they're very dependent on them. Most of the solutions that are needed around relieving pressure on seagrasses is really about empowering local communities to manage and protect these ecosystems. So the sort of partners we look for are those that help us find effective, long-term, sustainable ways to do this. And so we look for creativity, flexible, low-cost and low-tech solutions so they can create another form of income for local communities and also produce some revenue or dollars that can be used to go back into the protection of seagrass ecosystems.
Matt, if you could have a video playing when I speak the next time, that would be great. People are going to like my answers a lot more.
I was going to say we don't have video of Donna Quan joining us, but we do have dynamic video for each of the responses that we have for her. And just as we continue on, Samil, I'd love to kind of get into something you started to talk about after you gave your pitch, which is just how you've been able to refine your pitch over time. How have you been able to perfect your pitch or to polish your pitch over time?
Thanks, Matt. So I think it's really interesting. I mean, I came from a background of working at General Electric, and we have a reputation there of having a really good way of doing pitches, but it used to be a way where it was just chock full of content, a lot of words on a slide, and we started kind of move to having more visuals. But what was really interesting for me is when we won the Blue Economy Challenge and we participated in the Aquacelerator, working with Dave and some of the rest of the SecondMuse team down in Perth for the kickoff, we were asked to put a presentation together. And it was really a really good process to see, like, what's the right way to present your message in a clear and concise way with more visuals to get the meaning across that you want to a wide variety of stakeholders. And we all of the 10 winners had to do that and present it. And we used that presentation deck actually for probably a good year at different places when we presented. And then as part of the Fish 2.0 competition that we were asked to enter, they had a similar process towards the finals where they had a professional pitch coach work with the finalists to prepare a presentation using kind of some some tried and true methods that are used in Silicon Valley about how to tell your story and the sequence of telling the story. And that was another really good experience. And some of the key lessons I learned was, keep it simple, use a lot of visuals, be able to do it quickly. And because the visuals point is important because people can take in so much more content visually than they can audially. And so if you put up a image with just a few words and you're speaking in the background and you're not just repeating what the words say, it's much more powerful. But if you put too much content, they can't take it all in because you have a very limited amount of time to focus on any one slide. So it has to be kind of tight, And then the other thing is really always end with an ask. Your audience is there. Tell a story. That's the most important part. People love to hear stories. That's how we raised genetically, right? Is really to respond well to stories. Try to touch on emotion because that makes it memorable. A good story is memorable if it resonates with you emotionally. And then end with an ask, because if you do the first two things well, if you tell a good story that touches on somebody's emotions, then they're going to be vested and they're going to want to help you. And how can they help you if you don't ask for help? If you don't end with something that says, here's how I would really appreciate your help. And they're like, God, I'd love to help that person. I don't know how though. So I'll move on to the next thing in my day, right? So those were some important lessons.
Amazing. And speaking of asking, again, just segueing from what you were saying, if anyone has any questions, feel free to message me and we'll get to those toward the end of the presentation. I know I have a lot of questions for everyone on the panel. And just to get to my next question, you just explained, Samil, some of the best practices when it comes to your pitch. And I want to get into what it was from the perspectives of Donna, David, and Stephanie that really resonated when it came to your pitch. And actually, just to start out, I want to share the clip from Donna about why Enter Gaia.
So Enter Gaia was a good fit because one of the things that we realised was that we were lacking some expertise or some partnership gaps in business. As you might know, environmental and conservation hasn't had a good reputation or good background in connecting with the business sector. So Enter Gaia was a good fit because they were a social enterprise and they helped us provide a flexible and low-cost solution that matched the needs of our communities. And they were particularly helpful because they were creative and flexible in thinking about a model that was a potential use in our situation. So the Spirulina social enterprise farming model, which allows the community members to be spirulina farmers, if you like, and they also buy back the product, so that allows them to be included in the market value chain and also provides access to markets. This was a gap that we just didn't have in some of the work that we had been sort of supporting. So Enter Gaia really appealed to us because we could see their potential when they presented their work, even though the connections weren't clear about how that would all work out. And we could speak the same language quickly and find common ground. And we're both committed to, very early on to having conversations and seeking opportunities to talk directly.
All right, and to build on that, by the way, I just want to say I love all the footage of the spirulina chocolates and linguine. It looks delicious, and I wish I had some now. But to segue over to David, what was it about Enter Gaia's pitch and Enter Gaia that appealed to you?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I'm thinking about this in the context of our audience and how to make this the most useful and kind of make sure that we're not just giving specifics about Enter Gaia, but like what are some high level takeaways that everybody on the call can be thinking about and integrating. I mean, I think on a very simple level, there was this this kind of combination of both technical expertise and credibility that Samil brought, both from having done this in person, so there was something physical he could show people. He had the pictures of the rooftop farms in Thailand and Bangkok, but he also brought, when he was pitching, the chocolates and the pastas, and we were able to sample those. So there was something very tangible and physical that people sensed. The expertise came from his background with GE. I think that brings a lot, so being able to put that on the table. But then also he brought to the table humor. If you were there, you would be cracking up, because he kept making references to his mother-in-law, and almost all of his jokes were based around around Bonnie and her participation in InnerGaia and the work that she was doing. So it brought some levity to the situation. And honestly, I think everybody can relate, whether it's a conversation between an investor and an entrepreneur, or whether it's a conversation between colleagues, or whatever the situation is. When you create an environment that is relatable, and when you create an environment where people are comfortable and laughing, you're going to be more willing to find the types of partners, whether that's funding partners or different types of partners, like with UNEP and Donna, that Samil was able to facilitate. That kind of humor and that levity and humbleness comes to the forefront. I will say that one of the areas that we really look for at SecondMuse is finding entrepreneurs that are looking for not just funding, but that can be supported in other ways. Like, how do we help Samil find the right person to guide him on creating a business model that will work in India, Thailand, and all of these different other countries? So something that's flexible, something that may incorporate like microsave and different types of financing options for farmers. So different types of ways that we can be supportive. Obviously, Samil was able to track down some traditional funding as well, and some investor funding. But I think a lot of the benefit that we were able to provide through the Aqua Accelerator came through these different types of capacity building, some connections, and ways to think through different parts of his business that not all accelerators necessarily cover or focus on.
Great. And Stephanie, to you, the same question. What was it about Enter Gaia's pitch from your perspective that appealed to you?
Thanks, Matt. And I was told that I was a little too formal in my first presentation, so I'm going to relax a little bit. But, representing the Australian government, and probably I'm going to give my comments from the perspective of a government. And I know for people on the call, you may or may not have had some success with accessing funding from governments, but I've been told it's not easy, and I understand that. For public accountability for our money, we have to go through very set processes. So when we set our challenge, or we put out, like a give us your good ideas, we are expecting people to have read very clearly what we're hoping to achieve. And specifically to InnerGaia, I would say that what attracted us to InnerGaia was a clear and compelling story. And I'm thinking about the first time I read their application, not when I got to see Samil pitch in person, which was very different. But what really struck me was that he obviously had a compelling personality. And I think when you're looking for innovators or entrepreneurs, you want to feel like the person who's applying and pitching to you not only understands the topic really deeply, like David said, technically, but they are passionate about it. And through thick and thin and no funding and some funding, they're probably going to stick with it because they care so much. And I think that came through very clearly with Samil, that he was committed. He had had this, successful corporate career, but he'd given it up in order to help people achieve better nutrition. So I think there was something really interesting about the spirulina element. We were keen to look for alternative protein sources as an alternative to fish and overfishing, and to think that you could get equivalent or better protein nutrition from this little green powder, you know, is pretty interesting and pretty exciting and very flexible. Coming from the poverty reduction angle, we were very interested in the ability for local communities, like Donna from the United Nations Environment Program said, an alternative livelihood source for these communities who would traditionally be farming or fishing, that they could now farm and grow spirulina in a small location, not take up, they don't need lots of land to grow crops. They can potentially, these women predominantly, we were also very impressed with Enter Gaia's focus on empowering women and giving them ownership of, you know, a small business where they could get a guaranteed income if they followed the directions and they grew the spirulina and it was of a good quality. But that they could do that alongside all of their other jobs, their work, they're looking after their families. And I think that was really, that really came through strongly in Samil's pitch. We were also impressed that there was some track record of the business, that they had made some traction into selling the spirulina to companies in Europe. And we were thinking that, okay, there's some sustainability potential there, if not radical profits yet. But I like that two-pronged approach of has a market for the product in developed countries, but also this livelihoods replacement and nutrition in developing countries. So I think that probably sums it up. I think you can't underestimate the passion. Like, are you truly passionate about what you're doing? And does that come across in your pitch? To cut through, and I'm thinking about government here, cut through all the bureaucratic applications and paperwork that you have to do. That was very important to us.
Right. Thank you. And I think as a quick follow-up to that, I actually just want to throw it back to Samil to ask, because now I'm really realizing that, you know, you had so many stakeholders to appeal to in applying, obviously in this case to the Blue Economy Challenge, but in other cases to other programs. So are there any other key tips or insights you have for people who are really intimidated by the process?
Well, I think, you know, it's important to know the audience, right? And tailor your presentation to, you know, kind of like what Stephanie was mentioning, really kind of have to see what is it that's important to this stakeholder, so that you can tailor that message to them. And if your message doesn't tailor to that stakeholder, you shouldn't force fit it. It means that you should find a different stakeholder that's a better match. So I think it's important to know who are the right people you're trying to approach in terms of investors or government or whatever. Understand exactly what their needs or requirements are, and then tailor your message to those needs or requirements, and do it in a way that's relatable. So tell a story that kind of resonates or touches on things that are important to them.
All right, thank you. And again, I just want to underscore, I think one of the benefits of this workshop is that we're able to get your perspective, but then also the perspective of Stephanie and David and Donna, which is, it's really interesting to see how it all pieces together to give a full picture of what makes a strong pitch. And to get into the last question that I have for our panelists, and I'd love to start with you, Stephanie, with this one. What tips do you have for entrepreneurs when it comes to crafting the pitch? And more specifically, what's the best way for an entrepreneur to understand what what you're actually looking for in a pitch?
Thanks, David. I mean, Matt, oh, sorry. I knew it was you, Matt. So I don't think I am an expert in pitching, but I have definitely listened to a lot of pitches. I know what I like. And probably one hurdle for people who are pitching to me is that first they have to get through the application process. And usually that is a written application in English. And I know we have some people on the webinar for which English is not your first language. And I apologize that that is probably quite a barrier that you need to apply in a written form in English. But sadly, that's the language that we work in. I think I would suggest that if people were interested in accessing some of our funding or knowing what we have available, then the Global Innovation Exchange, which Sveta manages with some of our funding, is a really great place to go and look. We post all of our specific innovation funding opportunities on there. You can also go and search by the Australian government or by USAID, the American aid agency, or any of the other governments, and see what types of innovations they are funding, which can give you a little insight into how are people telling their stories. On the Global Innovation Exchange, there is a place where people put their video pictures or information about their innovation, and you can get an idea of the sorts of messages that are compelling to government donors, which might be different to private investors. As far as like what you need to include in your story, in your application to really get our attention, we really need to have a clear link to the development impact. So what is what you're doing? How is that going to reduce poverty, make lives better for people who may not have a job or access to healthcare or education? So that's very probably our number one. And then we often have very geographically specific, you know, we're looking for something in the Pacific Islands, or we're looking for something in Southeast Asia, or we're looking for something in Africa. And I would just read the criteria closely so that you don't spend a lot of time applying for something that you probably won't be eligible for. And Matt, maybe you can ask me, let me know whether I've answered that question fully, because I think I went off on a few different tangents there.
No, definitely. I think you answered the question, and it brings up an interesting point that not every single opportunity for funding is for every single entrepreneur. Sometimes you need to find opportunities that are a stronger fit for you. And I think the Global Innovation Exchange is a great resource for that. And also what you're saying, Stephanie, reflects a bit of what Donna Quan said in her response. So I'm actually going to queue up and share her response with everyone.
I think in terms of how entrepreneurs can better understand goals and tailor messages, I think a lot of that is very open communications. Like I said, it wasn't obvious that spirulina and seagrass conservation and dugong conservation was a natural fit. So it took some time on both sides to understand where the opportunities were. And so in terms of actually having a resource, I can't think of one that would help in this case. But I think if there was a resource, I think it's in terms of the ability and the willingness to be open-minded, creative and patient, and to take the time to understand where the common interests and the opportunities are. And that implies, you know, a significant level of trust, because as a UN entity, you know, we have to be very mindful about who we partner with. And there's obviously due diligence involved in that. But the other side of it, to pursue the relationship in the long term, you know, we have to have a really open relationship and constantly check that we are, you know, really understanding and on the same page.
Yeah. So one point, just to echo what Donna was saying, is the communication. And it's also something that you were saying, Stephanie, about being sure that there's understanding there. So that might mean having conversation once you actually have that opportunity. But if it's an application, there are the criteria there, and it's important to pay attention to that, as well as what organizations are looking for overall. What are their mission statements, their vision, so on and so forth. David, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting to see the evolution of Samil's presentation for Enter Gaia. I definitely noticed a couple of new elements that make a lot of sense when pitching to private, to venture capitals, or to funders that are coming more from an equity perspective. Like the team slide, for example, is something that I don't remember from the deck that we had. So, I mean, you talked about it a little bit, Samil, but thinking a lot about your audience and who that is, and forming your deck and your presentation, your pitch to that audience. I think what I would like to kind of use this question to kind of prompt a little bit is thinking a little bit creatively about how you go about finding those opportunities. And so that pitch will adjust to those opportunities. But thinking beyond just the funder, the traditional kind of government funding or the traditional investment funders, and thinking about ways to find project implementation opportunities as a way to finance your project. Looking at potentially how can I collaborate with another organization to make myself more attractive as an entity or as an idea or as an innovation. An example now for a project we're working on with the World Bank right now is that they won't directly provide financing to a private enterprise. And so even if you're a social enterprise, there's mechanisms that are preventing them from providing you direct funding. So how do you partner with a non-government organization or a nonprofit so that you can receive some of that funding, or you can implement together? Another thing that's just like a very tactical item that I think I've mentioned now, but again, Samil brought chocolates and pasta. So that physical kind of, I'm pitching along with something, the product that I can actually see. Maybe you're not at that stage of development where you're going to have a physical product or something that you can share. But you can always share a one-pager. You can always leave something that they can take home with them and that they can digest and kind of synthesize more. I wish it was the scenario where at a conference or at these big events that everybody was paying great attention to everything that's being said. But the reality is that if they can go home with something that reminds them about what you talked about and what you presented, whether that's something they can eat and enjoy or whether it's something they can look at and understand a little bit more, that's always going to be pretty helpful.
Great, and thank you. And just as a follow-up to that, first and foremost, thanks to Donna Quan for the recording, David, Stephanie for weighing in with your responses. But Samil, to turn over to you, I'm just wondering, before we get into questions, where can people learn more if they're interested in learning more about your work?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, you can find us on our website, InnerGaia.com, spelled the same way. We also have a YouTube channel, Facebook page, which is Fresh Spirulina, actually, and we post our company newsletters on that Facebook page. We have a Twitter account and some other things as well, Instagram. But actually, if you don't mind, Matt, I'd just like to take a couple seconds and touch on something Dave mentioned, because it's a really, really good point. You want to be memorable, and having a physical or tangible item, object, product to show is a really, really good thing to have, because not everybody tends to think about bringing that. And it doesn't have to be a finished form, like Dave said. If you don't happen to be far enough along that you have a finished form, then you could kind of follow the tenets of Eric Ries and others, which is the lean startup author, and have a minimum viable product. So it could be just a demo, and it could be made from paper of what your thing will look like. And another advantage of having something like that is to get feedback. I mean, examples, it's not really just it serves a double purpose. One is to raise awareness about spirulina, because it hasn't reached the tipping point yet. And so we recognize that we need to take every opportunity to share what it is, show that it doesn't taste bad, explain about its nutritional benefits, and let more people know about it. And then they can tell other people, and they can tell other people, and that viral message spreads. but it's also to get feedback on specific products and say, hey, what did you think of this? Did you like this chocolate? Did you like this pasta? Did you like this energy snack? How can we make it better? Would you buy it? What price would you pay? Et cetera, et cetera. You know, there's an invaluable opportunity there in an audience full of your most likely your target demographic of customer to get feedback in a nice, meaningful, relatable way that serves multiple purposes. So I would really say that Dave's point is an excellent, excellent one that should be considered strongly by any entrepreneur.
I think that ties in actually with one of the questions that we received, which is basically about, you know, what experiences you had under your belt before you dedicated yourself to your pitch. And I'm wondering, when did you get to the point when you actually felt confident pitching your product and your company to people?
That's a good question, and I think it's going to be very circumstance specific. So let me tell you what I mean by that, right? I mean, at GE, I had a lot of roles where I was ultimately was customer facing, or I was in management, so I had to present to senior management in a lot of cases. And so I had gained confidence over probably a decade and a half of presentations in how to pitch, right? Because I think there's two questions here. One is, when are you ready to step away from something and dedicate yourself to being an entrepreneur and follow your passion, right? Because as Stephanie mentioned, it's our passion that drives us. You have to be passionate about what you're doing. So that's one question. What's the right timing and how does that work? And then another question is really, when are you confident in giving a presentation? And that one, it can be because you've done it a lot previously, which was the case for me. And then now you're just kind of refining it, getting the story itself better, the deck better. I mean, as David mentioned, and Stephanie remembers, like the very first presentation I gave, one of David's colleagues, Jeremy, helped coach me on it. It was a presentation that was in the third round of the Blue Economy Challenge, right? So one of the first that in my interactions with David and Stephanie. Then there was the presentation at the Accelerator after we had been one of the winners, which ended up looking very different from the one that we did in the finals and the third round. Then there's the one I just showed you for Fish 2.0, which caters to a little bit different audience, and it looks very different as well. And that variance is good because it keeps it fresh in people's minds. The same folks, if they see the same presentation year over year, it kind of becomes stale. So you want fresh content, you need to find a way to gain confidence in presenting, and that could be from experience or just doing a lot. One of the important lessons from Fish 2.0's pitch coach is you have to rehearse. Rehearse, 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 because if you rehearse it, you get more and more confident, comfortable, if you can do it in time. So that's a way. If it's a question about when do you feel like you're ready to leave whatever you're doing, a full-time job or something, to become an entrepreneur and give that pitch to follow your dream, that one, what I tell people, young entrepreneurs, when I'm at events, I say, you have to recognize the percentages. 1 out of 10 entrepreneurs are successful, 9 out of 10 fail. Now, it's not because they're all bad ideas or the people aren't capable. There's a lot of factors that get involved. You might be underfunded. You might be too early to the market. You might be too late to the market. Your technology that you thought would work in pilot scale doesn't scale, well. So there's a lot of factors, but the reality is the percentages are such. Now, you have to have the confidence to feel walking in that you're going to be one of the 10 that's successful. But you need to be pragmatic enough to realize that, how do I position myself in such a way that if I'm not one of the 10, if I'm one of the 9, life will go on. Because the biggest lesson entrepreneurs learn, and it's why it's experiential learning, it can never be textbook learning in my opinion, and I know Simon Sinek and others feel the same way, if you're familiar with him, is because the biggest learning for entrepreneurs is risk-taking. You have to learn to take a leap. I left a 6-figure job as an executive at General Electric to follow my passion, working with rural communities to grow spirulina. My parents, who are conservative Indians, were looking at me as if I'd grown a second head. You need to be able to be confident that you're going to be successful, have a passion that you want to follow, but set yourself up and know that you're going to gain a lot of wonderful experience. Life will go on. You can always find another job if it doesn't work out. Set yourself up budget-wise that, if you think it's going to take a year to be successful, budget for 3 years, because the reality is first-time entrepreneurs always under budget and expect it to take a lot less time than it really does. And just think through all that stuff. Have a good mentor, maybe an actual, current entrepreneur or former entrepreneur who can share lessons learned with you. I'm sorry that I'm going a bit long, but I'll finish with this. One of the most important lessons I learned when I went to an entrepreneurial summit early in my days, back in 2010 in Barcelona, there was a panel of investors, really big name, bigwig people from bigwig companies like Silicon Valley, VCs, and they talked about what they look for in entrepreneurs. And one of the most poignant comments was they look for second-time entrepreneurs. That's who they prefer to invest in, not first-time entrepreneurs. And I thought about that a lot, and I thought about it continuously over years. And the more I go, the more I really understand why they say that, right? Because as a first-time entrepreneur, you learn a lot of lessons, you build a lot of networks. It takes you a lot of time to learn these things. You figure out the best ways to do stuff, legal, contracts, company setup, tax structuring, all the small back office stuff, HR management, and the technology side, and the risk-taking side, and the funding side, and the budgeting, accounting, etc. And if I was an investor, I wouldn't want to invest in somebody to spend 7 years to learn that themselves the hard way. I'd rather invest in somebody who already put the money in and time themselves to do it, and then now is saying, okay, I can do a lot smarter in 2 years because I spent all the time to do it myself, right? So the way to circumvent that is with good networks, with strong connections to people like SecondMuse, DFAT, and their networks of other entrepreneurs. That's the model that 500 startups employs, et cetera, right? Use a cohort and learn from them. Some of the other people in the Blue Economy cohort, I still talk to today. I talked to Thibaut, last month about something, who's from Indian Ocean Trepang, to ask him for questions because he's a former CFO and he has a lot more background than me, who's an aerospace engineer in finance. So sorry again for the long-winded answer. I tend to be a long-winded person, but as my wife tells me, but I think that's the answer to those two questions, Matt.
Yeah, and I think that actually is a key point. I love what you're saying actually about like really tapping into your community too. But I have one last question. I think we have time for just short responses from both Stephanie and David on this question. That we were talking about researching what your potential funders and partners want, but we were also talking about, Stephanie, you mentioned wanting passion, and there are certain qualities we want from the entrepreneurs we support. So I'm wondering from you, Stephanie, from you, David, what's the balance between tailoring your approach to the potential funders versus just kind of accentuating certain pieces of what you already bring to the table? Either one of you could start out.
And we're both going to go.
Go
You
ahead,
go, Dave. Oh.
I don't know if there's a perfect answer. I mean, I think I honestly think your main goal with that first presentation should be to capture people's attention. And so that's going to play up to your individual personality and your individual background and what you're presenting. So if you bring a really a lot of depth to a technical issue, then show that off and impress them with that. If you have like this really amazing personality that people are going to relate to and that's just going to show your leadership potential, then people are going to buy into that. So I would play to your strengths on this one.
And I would probably say, if you are tailoring your pitch just to meet the requirements of the funder and it's not playing to your core strengths, we will notice. Like if we think, oh, you've never worked in the Pacific Islands, you have no contacts in the Pacific Islands, you're tangentially related to the topic we're looking for, like you're just not going to make it through. So sometimes it is very serendipitous and you find a competition or a challenge like the Blue Economy Challenge that could have been written for you, like Enter Gaia. And often, I know it's a hard slog. I cannot urge you strongly enough to look at the Global Innovation Exchange and look at other platforms that help you find funding that might be relevant for you in your geography, in your sector. But if you, on the other side of that coin, maybe by applying to a challenge that doesn't quite fit what you've been doing, you open up different opportunities. So potentially, I don't know if, I think Samil already had an aim to expand into developing countries and work with women, but potentially that part of the business has gone gangbusters.
I think the Australian government has a thing against the word gangbuster and cut her off.
All right. Well, it looks like Stephanie froze, but we are also at about time, and so I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And Sveta, do you have any final reminders as we close out?
Matt, can I just add one quick comment to
Please.
the last question? Sorry. I think Stephanie mentioned a really good point, right? And so don't try to force fit your thing into a challenge, but like we talked about before, networks really help. Like she said tongue in cheek that the Blue Economy Challenge was written for us, and she meant that because we ended up being a really good fit. It actually, honestly, wasn't written for us. I actually found out about the Blue Economy Challenge by accident. I found out about it from somebody in my network who had applied, or who told us, told one of the people on my team at an event that, hey, I saw this challenge, it would be a really good fit for you guys. And that was Emma, who ended up being on the council from Faragora. She told one of my team members, and then that's how we learned about it. Otherwise, I might not have never known. We might never have applied. So sometimes it's just making sure your network is broad and you have a lot of friends who can tell you, yeah, this might be a really good fit for you. It's hard to see everything. There's not a centralized location for all of it to be visible. The second piece is sometimes some challenges are very strategic to apply for because they can help you a lot. So what I mean by that is I highly recommend anybody in the aquaculture space to apply to the Fish 2.0 challenge. Even if you don't think that you may be ready to win it, it's really because the process they put you through with the judging rounds will help your business to be better. Honestly speaking, they give you great feedback, their questions are really good, and their objective through that competition is not actually the prize, because the prize is very small. It's to help every applicant with training and material and feedback and judging that will make their enterprise better. And so from that strategic perspective, you should enter it anyway, no matter what.
Awesome. And again, Global Innovation Exchange is a great resource for finding a lot of those different challenges that might be a good fit for you to apply to and potentially practice your pitch with, or pitch to and find potential support. But Sveta, any final words?
No, I think all of you have mentioned everything that I would have said about Global Innovation Exchange, but the one thing I wanted to just say is a huge thank you to all of our panelists for taking the time. Donna's not on, but including her for taking the time to record the responses. I thought that this was helpful, and I hope our listeners did as well. I know since the timing is not perfect for a lot of folks, they'll be listening to the recording. So I thought this was really helpful, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And if you have any questions for Global Innovation Exchange, or of any of our panelists, you can email us anytime at admin@globalinnovationexchange.org, and we'll do our best to respond to them or facilitate the connections as needed. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.